So in our last reading, Teddy's dad came home and Teddy was able to share with him everything that had happened and catch him up to where they were at. And his dad said that two things bothered him. Okay, first of all, the dead jaguar. Everywhere else he's worked, in all of the zoos, there's always been a list of dead animals so that all the zookeepers know. The second thing that was kind of odd that he brought up was the metal track at the bottom of Hippo River. Really? It seemed odd to me that out of everything I told my father had focused on that. But Mom always said that Dad had a gift for seeing the big picture. What do you think it's for? I have no idea, Dad admitted, but tomorrow we are going to find out. Chapter 15, The Dead List. Pete Thwacker was right. The next morning the news was all about the escaped tiger, and not just the local news, even though it seemed to me there were far more important things going on in the world. Kashmir was the lead story on every channel. You might have thought Iran had strapped nuclear weapons on the tiger's back for all of the coverage. Every show had plenty of footage of Kashmir wrecking havoc. Several park employees had used their phones to film him, then uploaded their videos to YouTube. I even caught a glimpse of myself and Mom in one shot, standing to the side and watching, although there was no mention of us by name, or the fact that we'd been in danger. My family wasn't really surprised we'd been left out of the story. What did surprise us was the revelation that Fun Jungle knew who let the tiger out. At some point in the night, they'd even issued a press release to that effect. The event had been an act of sabotage perpetrated by the Animal Liberation Front. Pete himself appeared on all the major morning news shows via satellite. He was surprisingly well kept and confident, given the state of mind that he'd been in last night. The ALF, which stands for Animal Liberation Front, the ALF has a history of sending threatening letters to Fun Jungle and other zoos, despite our commitments to conservation and quality animal care, Pete stated. Now they have attacked. Setting Kashmir free was a blatant act of terrorism, was a blatant terrorist attack designed to both make Fun Jungle look bad and hurt our bottom line, without any consideration for the safety of our guests last night. Thankfully, our keepers handled the situation professionally and no one was hurt. The sad thing is that while the ALF claims to be looking out for the animals' best interest, it is they, in fact, who are doing harm to the animals in their desperate bid to discredit us. How's that? The news anchor asked. Our internal investigation has uncovered evidence that the ALF was also behind the death of our beloved Henry the hippo. Mom, Dad, and I turned to the television, stunned by Pete's announcement. His interviewer was visibly startled. Are you saying that Henry was murdered? No, but he definitely died, whether premeditated or not, because of the actions perpetrated by the ALF. What's your evidence? I'm not at liberty to reveal that at this time for fear of jeopardizing the ongoing investigation, but I can say that the full details will be released as soon as possible, most likely after the funeral services for Henry this afternoon. Even I had to admit, while Pete was a moron when it came to animals, he was awfully smart when it came to PR. In just a few sentences, he had turned the scandal over the escaped tiger around to focus the blame on the ALF, and even got in a plug for Henry's funeral as well. After his interview, the news program staff had forgotten entirely about Kashmir. All they could talk about was Henry. Pete, or his minions in the PR department, worked the same magic on all the other morning shows as well. I thought Fun Jungle didn't want anyone to know Henry was murdered, I said. I suppose they'd rather have people talking about that than an escaped tiger, Mom replied. Pete's words were bittersweet for me, though. While I felt redeemed to have finally got the word out that Henry had been murdered, it was annoying to get no thanks for all my hard work and to be so shut out of the investigation that I had to hear the recent developments on the news like every other person in America. Plus, something about the quick reveal that the Animal Liberation Front was responsible rubbed me the wrong way. Despite all of the claims that evidence had been uncovered showing their link to Henry's death, I hadn't found anything along those lines, and I'd been the first one to investigate. I told Mom and Dad this. To my surprise, they were uncomfortable with Pete's accusation as I was. I know plenty of people who've been involved with the ALF over the years, Dad said. They're radical and even destructive, but I have a hard time imagining them doing something like this. Then why is Fun Jungle saying they did? To deflect attention from whoever did do it, Mom said. Then, do they know who did it? Not necessarily, Dad replied, but finding the real criminal isn't the point of PR. It's making everyone think no one at Fun Jungle is to blame. So then, Fun Jungle might not really be trying to find the bad guy at all. They might only be trying to find someone to take the fall? Possibly. But then the real bad guy gets away. Not if we can help it, Dad said. So we set off to learn answers to the questions Dad had posed. How many animals had died at Fun Jungle, and what was the metal groove in Hippo River? I was thrilled to have Dad home and helping with the investigation. Even though Summer had lent a hand, things were different with my father. Despite the attempts on my life, with him at my side, the investigation felt less dangerous and more like one of our adventures. Plus, Dad's presence made investigating easier. First, he was highly respected around Fun Jungle, and simply put, he was an adult. When you're a kid, everyone is naturally suspicious of you. I know I didn't have the best reputation around Fun Jungle, but still, if an adult acts like they belong somewhere, more often than not, no one gives them a second glance. As a kid, you stick out. There are plenty of places you're not supposed to go. There are plenty of questions you couldn't get away with asking. It's very hard to be taken seriously when everyone is wondering where your mother is. Dad didn't even have to make up a story to be allowed into the veterinary hospital. He simply pushed the button. He simply pushed the buzzer, waved at the security camera, and said, "Hey, Roz, it's me." Roz quickly buzzed both of us in and then greeted us with a warm smile. "Welcome back," she cooed to Dad. "How was China?" "Wonderful," Dad said, and then regaled her with a few amazing tales of a giant panda to get her in a good mood. Dad had a way with women, particularly older women like Roz. They just stared at him dreamily as he told his stories. Mom always said they were imagining themselves 30 years younger. If Roz had any idea who'd we'd nearly been munched at the party the night before, she didn't show it, and she just hung on every word. Once Dad had her really hooked, he smoothly segued to the task at hand. "I could talk to you all day about this, but we both have work to do. I was told you have a list of all the animals who have died at Fun Jungle." Roz reacted more curious than suspicious. "What do you need that for?" "McCracken wants photographic documentation of every animal that comes to Fun Jungle. His office gave me a list of every animal that's been shipped here, but they said it's not completely accurate because it doesn't take into account the animals that have died. I don't want to go running around all day looking for an animal that no longer exists, so they sent me here for the list." "I see, only I don't have any list like that." "You don't?" "No, no one ever told me to keep one." "Could you remember all the animals that died?" I asked. Roz grimaced, finding the thought of doing this distasteful. "I suppose it'd be a great help," Dad said, flashing her his best smile. That put Roz over the edge. "Well, let's see. Sadly, there have been quite a few. First, there was Carl, the capybara. Such a shame. He's a real sweetheart, so adorable. I think he has some sort of gastric disorder." Roz's true love for animals was definitely showing through. A capybara is the world's biggest rodent. It looks more like a compacted Airedale than a giant rat, but I'd still never heard anyone refer to it as a sweetheart before. And then there was Sydney the sloth. I never got to know her. She got some kind of infection in transit and died en route. I'm sure she was lovely, though. All sloths are. "She died before she got here, but they still named her?" Dad asked. "Oh, no, darling. I named her. I name all the animals, no matter what. Sydney's so much nicer than calling her Sloth Number 6, don't you think?" "I suppose," Dad said, although I could tell he didn't mean it. Then there was Alistair. Let me guess," I said. "An alligator?" "No, an anaconda. I'm not partial to steaks myself, but he was darling. Unfortunately, some foolish cargo employee let his tail get crushed during delivery. It got infected, and by the time he got here, it was too late to save him." Dad was growing concerned now, not because of the deaths, but something about them. "I don't need to know the details behind how they all died," he said. "I only need to know, their names." "Let's see. There was Harriet the howler monkey, Oswald the ocelot, Agnes the ogty, Wally the wildebeest, Andrea the anteater, then Jerry the jaguar. Plus, there were quite a lot of little creatures that died en route, frogs and fish and stuff, but I'm afraid I don't have names for all of them. Doc didn't autopsy the small ones. He just buried them, I think." I doubted this last part was true. It was probably something Doc had told her to protect her delicate sensibilities. As much as Doc liked animals, he couldn't take the time to bury every one that died. He got rid of the small ones the way most people did, by flushing them down the toilet. That's quite all right, Dad told Roz. You've been extremely helpful. Thank you for your time. Feel free to come by any time, Roz cooed. The moment we were out the door, Dad asked me, "Did you notice that what all of those animals had in common?" I nodded. "Except for the wildebeest, they're all from the Amazon rainforest." Dad smiled, proud of me. "Exactly. That's suspicious, right?" "Extremely. First, that's a very long list of large animals to die in such short amount of time. But even if the deaths were natural, the probability is that you'd have dead animals from random places all over the world. Instead, we have a pattern. Almost every large animal that died is from the exact same region, and that suggests that something is wrong here." "What about the wildebeest?" "He's probably not significant. I'm betting he truly died from natural causes." "But all the others were murdered?" "I didn't say that, but I'd bet good money they didn't die for the reason Roz says they did." "You think Roz is on this?" "No, I think she's been lied to. But the only person who does the autopsy is Doc." "I know." I frowned. I can't imagine Doc killing all those animals. Sometimes I can imagine him killing people, but never animals. Same with me. And I'm not saying he did, but I'll guarantee you he knows something about all this. He's probably in the hospital right now. Why don't we go back and talk to him? "All in good time," Dad said. "There'll be plenty of opportunities to talk to Doc. Right now, we have to find out about the metal groove in Hippo River, and we only have a limited time to do that." Chapter 16, Bad Plans. What Dad meant was, to learn about the groove, he wanted to look at the blueprints for Hippo River. Unfortunately, the blueprints were in the administration's building, which was the tightest security of any building in Fun Jungle. They didn't use security guards like Large Marge there. They used tough ex-military guys who wore crew cuts and constant frowns. The men were armed only with tasers. Guns were deemed inappropriate at a theme park, even one in Texas. But every one of them looked like he was itching for the chance to use his. I'd always assumed the extra security was because J.J. McCracken had his office in that building, but now I began to wonder if there was something inside that J.J. wanted protected. Given their reputation, Mom and Dad could talk their way into pretty much any zoo building, but the administrator's building was different. It was stuffed with people who really didn't care about the animals or the people who studied them. They cared about things like daily operations and profit margins. They were people like Martin DeGatto, Pete Thacker, and his PR department, designers, architects, and a staggering number of lawyers. Most of the zookeepers had never been inside it. Neither had I, or Mom or Dad. The people who worked in the administration might have been suspicious of our presence in the building, particularly in the rooms we had to enter. So Mom and Dad had decided we should only visit when there would be almost no one inside, during Henry's funeral. It wasn't as though all the employees wanted to go to Henry's funeral. There were probably plenty of folks in administration who'd never even bothered to go see Henry when he was alive. But J.J. McCracken wanted the funeral to be an event. He and Pete envisioned a huge crowd of grieving employees and guests that would make this great for television, and thus reinforce the image of Fun Jungle as a place that truly cared about its animals. "It ought to look like Princess Diana's funeral," J.J. had reportedly said, "but bigger if possible." Lots of employees had grumbled that this was ridiculous, but most agreed to go anyhow for two reasons. First, it was paid time that they wouldn't have to work, and there was going to be an open bar at the reception. Even though the administrator's building would be virtually empty, though, we still had to get in, and to do that, we needed the help of one person the security staff would easily turn a blind eye to: Summer McCracken. With Mom and Dad's permission, I sent a huge email to Summer the night before detailing where we were with the case and what we needed for her help. She'd sent back only 2 words in response: "I'm in." The funeral was to take place just outside of Fun Jungle. JJ had decided he didn't want the actual grave within the park itself. He felt it would be morbid and give the impression that he wasn't taking good care of the animals. Finding the perfect spot had been a challenge. A team of PR men, geologists, engineers, landscape architects, and funeral planners had spent much of the last few days prowling the entire property for it. Finally, they'd settled upon a small grove of trees to the side of Albert Aardvark's parking lot. It wasn't that beautiful of a spot, but JJ had promised to spruce it up post-funeral with a small shrine to Henry where his fans could visit even after park hours. More importantly, the proximity to the parking lot allowed ease of access for funeral guests, any news channel that wanted to film the proceedings, and the industrial crane that needed to lower Henry and his coffin into the grave. JJ had been disappointed about the crane, believing pallbearers would have been more dignified. When Martin had pointed out that the coffin alone weighed a ton, JJ had suggested using elephants. Martin had finally convinced him that even elephants couldn't hoist the huge coffin, only a crane could. So, JJ determined to bring some nobility back to the proceedings. He had cajoled the Archbishop of Houston to preside over them. I'd heard that the Archbishop was balking at first, considering it undignified, until JJ had hinted that he might recruit a prominent rabbi instead. Apparently, lack of dignity was less important to the Archbishop than letting the world think Henry was Jewish. The funeral was planned for noon, so we'd arranged to meet Summer outside the administration building at 11:30. It was going to have to be a quick encounter. JJ and the PR department had insisted on Summer's presence by her father's side at the ceremony. Otherwise, every magazine in the country would be running articles asking where she was. The 11:30 target quickly fell by the wayside, however. The funeral wasn't going to start anywhere near on time. The park staff had prepared for every eventuality except one, that the funeral might be too popular. Thousands more people had showed up than expected. It hadn't been necessary for JJ to badger his employees into attending the funeral after all. Evidently, there were legions of Henry fans who needed closure. The crowd filled the Albert Aardvark, Betty Baboon, and Carla Camel parking lots, and still there were half a mile of line of cars backed up down the entrance road. A few devoted mourners had actually camped out the night before, staking out prime locations close to the gravesite. Now, everyone jostled for a space in the streaming parking lot while the special events team scrambled about trying to get more speakers so that the entire crowd could hear the ceremony, and more porta potties so everyone could pee. As it was, hundreds of guests were already slipping off into the woods around the parking lot to relieve themselves. Meanwhile, even JJ McCracken's family got stuck in the traffic. Mom, Dad, and I could do little but lurk around the administration building while doing our best to look like we weren't lurking. Mom told me to stop checking my phone because it looked suspicious, but I couldn't help it. I kept expecting Summer to text us an ETA, but she never did. Although I was pleased Summer had agreed to help us, I was beginning to find her lack of communication annoying. Despite her promise to tell me the long story of what had happened after she and her father had fled the tiger the night before, she hadn't. And short of one brief text, "Are you okay?" she hadn't even made an effort to check up on me. If she'd been the one who'd nearly been eaten by a tiger, I'd have beaten down her door to make sure she was all right. Mom suggested perhaps that Summer hadn't been able to get away from her bodyguards long enough to text or call, but I didn't believe that. Summer had been able to elude her bodyguards for an entire day when she wanted to. That she hadn't been able to find a few minutes to reach out to me made me think she didn't value our friendship as highly as I did. So by the time Summer arrived, I was feeling pretty angry. It was nearly noon and she was flushed with the heat. Her usual pink had been deemed inappropriate for such a solemn day. Instead, she wore a stylish black dress, although it was accented with a pink scarf. "Sorry," she gasped. "I had to ditch a horde of fans. We gotta make this quick. Dad thinks I just went to get a Coke." With that, she let us past the main entrance of the administration building and around the side to the loading docks, where supplies went in and trash came out. There was a security keypad there. Summer quickly typed in her special code and the door clicked open. As we slipped into the building, I couldn't keep my thoughts to myself any longer. "So, are you ever going to tell me what happened last night?" If Summer realized I was upset, she didn't show it. "Oh man, I'm sorry about that." She led us into the staircase and practically sprinted up. "Daddy didn't mean to leave you guys. He thought you were with us, and by the time he realized you weren't, well, it looks like your father had things under control." I found her glibness aggravating. This wasn't exactly the long story she'd promised, and there was something strange about the way she said it, as though she didn't believe what she was saying herself. I glanced at my parents and saw they weren't buying it either. "And you just left the party after that?" I asked. Well, there really wasn't any party after that, was there? Summer burst through a door onto the third floor and quickly led us down the hall. We didn't leave the park, though. We snuck back out through the keeper's route, notified security, and then came back here. Daddy spent the whole night on the phone trying to take care of the mess. Our plan to come to the administration building during the funeral had worked perfectly. There didn't appear to be another person inside. It was so deserted, I half expected to see tumbleweeds blowing through the halls. Do you know anything about the investigation into the tiger's escape? Mom asked. Summer stopped outside a nondescript door. It was marked only with a room number 333 and another security pad. Not much. Daddy and Buck are playing this pretty close to the chest, although I do know Buck thinks the ALF has an inside man at the park. Why is that, I asked. How else could they get the ladder into the tiger pit before the party? Summer checked her watch and then made a worried gasp. I've really got a motor, she said. Then she typed her security code on the keypad. The door clicked open. Let me know what you find, she told us, and then she bolted down the hall before we could ask another question. Once again, the brevity of our encounter made me feel as though Summer was hiding something. Before, when I'd spent time with Summer, I'd always enjoyed every minute, and now I felt irritated. I wasn't doing a good job of hiding my feelings because Mom put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Is something wrong?" That's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow to see what happens and to see if they find anything in the administration building. You'll have to wait and see. Have a great day.